Hi my dear friends, welcome in the new video. If you are not a member yet from our YouTube channel or my Facebook page or my LinkedIn page or my TikTok or my Insta, then please seek all these addresses and join, and even better, join our health club, the Daoland Health Club, or join our program in general or at our Patreon just to sponsor these videos on topics like this one. Like this topic today is based on a question that students keep on asking me, and I have replied on it in several ways, and that is namely, how do they become a Daoist through me? And it means that how can they seek a career as a Daoist or a life as a Daoist with me? I'm going to explain you a little bit about that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the stories that I picked up over time because of that, and then you have to make up your mind. And if you are really interested in these kind of things, first come study with me so that you know how I roll, and then after that you have decided, we can start talking about what you need to do, how you need to sign up, what it will cost you, and so on and so on, because becoming a Taoist doesn't cost you anything. You can give something if you want, because becoming a Taoist often is accompanied by a gift that people give, but there's no requirement. It is not an obligation. It's just something that makes monasteries roll and tick if people give donations. So as a Taoist, I only accept donations. I don't accept payments. For my courses, I charge, because you don't need to be a Taoist for it. So first of all, I want to repeat, becoming a Taoist for the kind of trainings that I give is not obligatory, but 90% of what I teach is Taoist medicine. There are some influences because of Western science, of course, but the study program is relatively amorph and gives you lots of opportunity to do side studies included in your main price if you do the full program. And then even the full program is relatively affordable for most people. When you live in a very poor country and the standard for education is that much lower, tell me and we can see if we can reduce a little bit of your effort, because idealism is idealism, and most important is that you do sacrifice something of your life in exchange for the hard work that you have to do. But I don't want you to starve to be able to study, right? So that's a very important part. The idea is to help people. So if you are serious about studying, I'm going to help you and give you the best quality of education that I can offer you, and leads to all kinds of things you can use for your own research and your development. So we're going to work on that. First of all, then second of all, then, or third of all, I should actually say, you have to make a difference in Daoism between orthodox Daoism and heterodox Daoism and informal Daoism. So let's talk a little bit about these things, because the orthodox Daoism is the Daoism that is recognized by the state. At the moment, when we are talking about heterodoxy, this is usually individual masters who have gone on a trek. I've met a lot of those when I was in China, and there's loads of them in the West who have really no real root in Taoism, and we're going to talk about one of them later. But they continuously prey on what people think is Taoism, and they sometimes are really crazy people. Some of them, though, on the other hand, are actually really very good. Some of them are very commercial, maybe they're even good, maybe are just auto-suggesting, but as a result of that, you cannot really rely on them. And the informal Taoists are usually people who have had a Taoist training. They're not officially doing state rituals and so on. They might do rituals, they might make them fit, like what I learned to a large degree from my first teacher when I was giving my Taoist training. And after that, a lot of different things that I learned about Taoism, or that were being Taoist, were mostly directed towards the state Taoism, towards the orthodoxy. And everybody was always warning me about the heterodoxy, for the simple reason that there are really a lot of exploitative figures in the heterodoxy, and sometimes people who are really confused themselves, and they are preying on that confusion mistaking Confucian and spirituality with each other, like what very often happens when people in a form of psychosis, which comes in many different kinds. So let me then talk about this, because both the heterodoxy can be informal, can be formal, but the orthodoxy is usually a very formal affair. You go through an oath, you go get particular training in a particular kind of order, you're being sent to teacher here, teacher there, and so on and so forth. And as a result of that, you develop yourself. You have to pay for that because the monastery has to live, and usually that happens either through donations to the monastery, that the monastic crowd gets paid all together at the same time, or through particular kind of services that people do, like performing rituals like marriages and so on. In Tongs and Daoism specifically, ceremonies are there specifically to provide income for the monastery. Very often there's also land attached to the monastery, so monks, they also farm, and as a result of that they live a plain and simple lifestyle. At least that is the idea, but in the city that's not always possible, and as a result of that things get a little bit more complicated. In the informal schools, there are schools which are leaning towards formalism and orthodoxy or heterodoxy, and so on and so on. So my school in that sense is best defined as an informal school at this stage of its existence anyway. Then going back to the urge to become a Daoist as a question is of course a very important one, because this is usually a moral one. It has to do with the way how you're looking for dedication. How I saw my oath was like a stick behind the door where my sifu could whip me with, or whether I could whip me with, if I would draw myself away from the path because of other interests. So it is a form of dedication, and the idea is that it is a permanent dedication. I have seen people breaking their oaths and then after that lead very normal lives, but the story in the oath is basically that at the moment when you break your oath, you're going to be slashed by thunder and die so many deaths, and anyway, just like everybody else, you will go to hell. So nothing new there so much. The idea is that if you commit a moral sin that is against your oath, that is going to be difficult for you, because you have to live with that. Some people are heartless enough, they have no problem with that, and some people, they are really conscientious. And as a Daoist, you're looking for the people who are really conscientious, not because they will be easy to comply with things, but because they will take it serious, and you don't really have to say or do anything. You don't have to help them, you don't have to warn them. They will just find their way through the materials that you offer, and when they are in a particular kind of need for a new development as a sifu, you will see that, or as a teacher anyway, you will see it, and then you will give them that kind of training. My own interest in Daoism is one that has actually many angles, and it is very difficult to say like this is really where it comes from. For instance, say, well, maybe it's karmic, or maybe I can say I was from childhood born with that. But I was one day at a meeting with a bunch of backers from my teacher Sifu Yaoshande, and they were asking me as a foreigner how it is possible that I got so developed in Daoism and these kind of things, and that I found my way to a place like that. So I said like, well, no, not exactly that sure, but it just has my interest already for a long time, through maybe dreams, maybe just reading about it, reading the Tao Te Ching, because of what my teacher Liu said that I should do, namely go to Wudang and complete my path, so to say, and finding my strength and understanding what I can do. And that what I can do is busy building on this healthcare program. This is my thing. In that sense, as a Daoist, this how I recompile what I learn to make it available for people in big cities. This is also what my Sifu Yaoshande gave me as an assignment a long time ago already. Like, okay, this is what we need to do, because there are a lot of city people, and you cannot learn everything through workshops. You have to have a continuous program, and you have to have a continuous discipline. And anybody who wants to become a Daoist in that sense has to dedicate through something like that, working on something, on the continuation of Daoism, in fact, whether it's formal or informal, whether it's orthodox or heterodox, that doesn't really matter that much. So these people, they ask me all kind of questions, like where does it come from? Are your parents Taoist, or are your parents interested in these kind of things? And they thought my parents probably had a very big library so they could get to know about it, or my family were aristocratic or whatever kind of things. And all these things I didn't have. My family is probably the most ahistorical family you can imagine, and I didn't get any starting point with that. I talked it over with Daoists and with the Buddhist teachers also about how that is possible, but they just said like, well, you know, things just sometimes happen, and you can call it karma, you can call it anything else. I just call it curiosity. If you are curious, of course, you're also interested in my program, in my movies, and you understand that a lot of the things that I talk about are not easy, and they're not easily fitting in the story that people usually create for Daoism, because they talk about fortune and happiness and health and stuff like this, and all these kind of things are nice, yes, but these are side effects of being a good person. So being a Taoist is about being a good person and not overcharge or anything like that when not necessary. So the charges that you do, they have to cover expenses. You should not make money with it, and you're there to help people and to support people, and you're supposed to be working on yourself so that you're able to support people and that you don't need support yourself. So this is a very important part. On the basis of that, you have to judge people as a Taoist or as a non-Taoist. I know this one master, he teaches about alchemy, he writes nice books and he tells interesting stories, but the way how he charges, I don't know what he needs the money for. Let me continue with my story. When I started my pathway to be serious as a Taoist, I was maybe 25, 26, and I was studying with a taiji master from Shanghai, Shen Hongsun, who was a grandson or a nephew from another big master from Shanghai, Shen Bao Tai, and I really felt very impressed by the things that he could do. But at the same time, I met this other master, Liu, who lived in a park very close, no, not too close, but a little bit close to where I was living. And I decided to go also train with him. And he taught me a lot of things about Taoism. The one teacher, Shen, he was like, oh, Taoists, these are weaklings, they have no power. You have to study Buddhism because they have power. Look at all these people wearing golden watches and beautiful jewelry and driving around in expensive cars. So they have power, and the Taoists, they don't do that. It's just a different morality. There's a different way of accepting things or putting things into motion. And if you study the I Ching, you know already a lot of things about what Taoists use as a base for how they live, because the I Ching is a moral teaching instrument about how to become more like heaven. You can follow that in my course, of course. Most people use the I Ching to predict their own future and to make choices about what they want to achieve in life, but there is so much more about the I Ching, which is much more valuable and has much more history than the predictive history. My teacher Liu said that in origin, or in the heart of Daoism, Daoism is actually pretty much an informal thing. So he advised me to stick to the informal and not to go too close to the formal. I like the formal because I like the rituals, I like to perform them, I like to study them and so on, but they are not the most important thing because they are about things that other people experienced. And the whole point of Taoism is to get to the point where you are experiencing things, and then at that moment create your own story, because that's Taoism. That is to step into the world of the immortals, and this is where you go to. And some of the things that you learn in average schools, they can get you on the way, but you really need a proper pathway. So what he did is he was trying to show me what kind of practices you need just to get a good foundation, and what kind of practices you need to get, you know, on a higher level. So when you become a Taoist, besides the things that I do in my normal program, these are all to create a good foundation. But the Taoist things, they go on top of that. That's a very important part, and they rise above that, and they have to bring you to that realm of immortals. I think that's the best way to describe it at that moment. I don't want to brag about that. I don't want to tell too much about it also, because a lot of people, they assume something about Taoism. And what is very important about Taoism is that Taoism is not like the Catholic Church, like a body with a leader on the top. And it's not like an empire, a body with a leader on the top. And it is not like a democracy or anything like that. It is a familyhood, you can say, of people who are working together all for the same path. In a way, you could say it's a little bit like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons in some ways, because they work through guilds, and in these little guilds people are being trained, and some of them they reach a high level, some of them a lesser high level, but you're free to reach the level that you want to go to, and that is a very important part. The Daoism, which it is at heart in that sense, is a personal goal. And so what do you want to achieve in that? It's just being immortal, and you want to become an immortal, you want to study it, or you are interested or anything like that. And I must say that when I started, I was like, immortals, that's just nonsense. But at a certain point, I was talking with my Sifu Yao Sun De at a daoist, at a sports event where there were a lot of competitions, and there was this crazy guy. I think I've talked about it in another video also, and I was laughing just like everybody else because he seemed crazy, and he bumped me in my elbow. Actually, I was sitting on that side, so he bumped me in the elbow on this side. And he said, like, you shouldn't laugh because you don't know if somebody crazy actually is an immortal coming here to teach you something. So you should never make fun out of people. That is, of course, in the idea of the West, where comedy and jokes about other people are the main fun, like roasting people, is then an impossibility. So for Daoists, they don't have that. It doesn't mean that they don't have fun, but they have fun in the coincidences that are happening in life in general. Some things are just ironic, or they are sarcastic, or they are cynical, or they are just fun, or cute, or something like this. There's a whole range of things which can serve as a form of sense of humor, or can offer you pleasure in life in that sense. As a Daoist, it's very important to try to develop yourself as plainly as possible. That means that you want to live a simple life, you want to make sure that you do not live excessively, you try to reduce or eliminate meat, and so on. So there are a lot of different kind of things that are important. There are, in the official descriptions from oaths, variations per school, like what is part of the oath, and there are differences in that. Livia Cohn wrote a book about it, if I remember well, and she showed also how different schools have different sets of oaths, and as a result of that, these oaths itself, trying to fulfill them, is also your teaching. That's your teachings that the school gives to you. So, like for instance, in the first oaths that I took in China, there was this one oath to be faithful to the government, and at that moment I had no idea what it meant. So I did the oath, and I asked later, like, what does that mean? And they said, like, well, it's faithfulness to the Chinese government, of course. But if you are not in China, then to the government wherever you are, I guess. But just like the Confucius Institute, when you go work with them, the Confucius Institute makes you sign a contract where it says that you can never ever say something bad against the Chinese government. Otherwise you can't get the contract, they won't work with you. So that's a very important part. And a lot of the oaths that people nowadays get, they are partly co-written with the Chinese government in mind, or maybe through the Chinese government. And a lot of schools, when you go to a Daoist Kung Fu school, the first things that you learn are according to the program of Sun Lutang, which is advised by the Chinese government, and advised is with a little bit of a serious tone there. There are some main differences in that sense within the different Daoisms, but to get into the official formal Daoisms is going to be a little bit more difficult. There are now a few training courses for foreigners. And when I came to China first time, I wanted to go to the Daoist University in Beijing. They didn't want to let me, in spite of my training. They said, we would like to have you, but because of the rules and regulations, on paper it says we can have 50 foreign students, but in reality it's 0, just simply because, there is no acceptance of foreign students at this point. You have to also understand that Daoism, like many other Chinese things, they are very nationalistic, and they have to be to survive. So it is okay to be Daoist, but to be an independent Daoist is in China much more difficult than, for instance, in the West. If you want to be recognized as a Daoist, as a foreigner by China, like what they said to me, is you can start a association for Daoists, which then anyway you have to set it up with a large separation from the Chinese government. The coincidence was that at the same time when Beijing asked me to set up something in the Netherlands, in Malaysia they also asked me something, and I have tried to commit to both organizations, and these are both core organizations. They're not competitive, they are complementary maybe. They do partly different program, but they use the same daolang, so in that sense there cannot be too much differences. In the current climate of Daoism, you see that commercialism is a large thing, but it's not all commercial. Like for instance, the Falun Gong seems to be very non-commercial, and some see it as a form of Daoism. I have met through my sifu with Leonce's teacher, old man, and he didn't have very much good words for it. They have not gone very far in their studies, but at a certain point they go through a stage where every student goes through, where they feel really empowered and powerful, and they feel special, and they feel all kind of powers coming into them and so on. And as a result that they get into this heterodoxy. So Falun Gong is a heterodox school, you can say. So you can see that they become money machines, and that's what you see with a lot of different kind of teachers. They radiate outward lots of kindness and so on, like the TV priests or the mass churches in the United States, and they pray with people, and they make a spectacle and emotional thing about it, and as a result of that, people become in the state of bliss. They come in the state of bliss, and as a result of the state of bliss, they have all kinds of experiences. But in Daoism specifically, it says you should never go there. You should always be calm, in the sense that you keep yourself Polonian on a distance of things, so that you have time and space to experience things as they are, and not as how you feel them, because how you feel them doesn't prove what they are, but what they are proves what they are, right? So when you feel what they are, then at that moment you grasp them and you make a determination, and then you're stuck with it. So you don't see anymore what it actually is. And this is one of the core tenets of Daoism that they got also from the Tao Te Ching, and also Zhuangzi suggests such things, and other schools of thought from China, they have thought about that. And as a result of that, you start developing an understanding of how things are. You are, though, like Lao Tzu says, avoiding the pitfall of populism, and because of avoiding the pitfall of populism, you might not become as popular as some other people. You might not be willing to sacrifice your ideas for a large commercial following. That's also why in my classes I put a limit on things, like so many students I can accept, so many students I cannot accept. It's too many. For the simple reason that you lose control. And like they say in Daoism, when money starts flowing in, it's a seduction. So you should have some money helping you in your work, but you should not have enough to have left over, so to say. In general, I think you have to judge for yourself, of course. If you want to become a Daoist, that's first. And you have to make sure that you find somebody who seems to be full of integrity or morally inclined enough to be able to deal with things properly. There are a lot of sects that go wrong, cults and so on. And I have always seen for my own work, like, oh, this is where you go towards a cult, this is where you become a teacher, where you stay a teacher. And this averageness is a very important part. In my pathways through all kinds of things that I went through as a student, I was put on this pathway, like, okay, do I become a hermit or do I become an ambassador of Daoism? So this ambassador of Daoism seems to fit me better because I like telling stories. So if you like this story, get more curious about what I do. join or support one way or the other. You don't have to support me a lot, but a lot of little bits. And you know, as you can see from the elections in America, a lot of little bits can bring people very far. When you are deciding to join me, we're going to get into a conversation with each other, and we can see who and what we are and why we are like that and what you need. Sure, I will make jokes about you sometimes, and you'll probably make jokes about me too. Maybe you will gossip about me, maybe you will complain about me. I've done all these things with my teachers too. In Daoism, you learn to remain critical about your teacher, so you should not blindly accept anything that a teacher says. Because of being an informal Daoism, you can still decide which direction you will go into. Yeah, so if you follow me, you can go into any direction. If the need comes or the possibility comes to create a formal Daoism together with several students, then that is possible. Then there is still the informal teachings. But then there comes a need to learn formal state-sanctioned rituals. I think to go through the prayers in your own language is already quite something. So to do a ritual is nice as a community affair, but to just understand the prayer and do them in your meditation, as part of your meditation, that is usually better. And my translation project, which is going to be published very soon, you will be able to see that. You can already sign up for that as a pre-sign up. You'll find it in my YouTube and my Patreon page. And if everybody signs up just for the translations, that's fine. In the end, the whole school will benefit from it. So thank you very much for your patience. If you want to be a Daoist with me, as some of you have asked, great, you're welcome. But make sure it is a real decision and not something you get back on in a later date. So that's the major thing that I actually, to some of you, have already said in the past also.